welcome to the Deep Dive. Today you're getting a front row seat to a simulated, really high-stakes military operation. It's been sparking a lot of discussion online.
That's right.
We're talking about a hypothetical U.S. military strike on Iran's key nuclear sites, specifically the events as they're described for June 21st, 2025. You've given us this detailed transcript, and our mission today is basically to pull out every crucial piece of information. From the massive aircraft involved to the specialized bombs, the ones designed to pierce deep underground.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, isn't just the outcome, but the sheer orchestration described in these sources. It's far from a simple operation.
Right.
We're going to unpack the sophisticated strategy, the, intricate layers of support needed, and the pretty formidable technology that would be brought to bear, all based on the intel you've shared with us.
Okay, so let's set the stage for this hypothetical strike.
Okay.
Where does an operation of this magnitude even begin? We're looking at a huge deployment here. Something like 125 aircraft aimed at Iran's three main nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. But the initial phase, the tip of the sphere, that's got to be the B-2 Steer bomber.
Undeniably, yeah.
Walk us through its first moves.
Okay, so the sources describe 6 B-2 Spirit bombers taking off. This is from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri on the morning of June 21st, 2025.
Missouri, that's a long way.
It is. And what's crucial to understand about these planes, they're often called massive fuel guzzlers, is their absolute reliance on aerial refueling for these, extremely long-range missions.
Right. The tankers?
Exactly. The KC-135 Stratotankers are really the unsung heroes here. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you see the U.S. strategically positioning Allied air bases. This is to mitigate pilot fatigue and enhance operational reach.
Makes sense. Like where?
We're talking about places like Diego Garcia, Qatar, maybe Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. These serve as secure launch points for operations across the Middle East, Africa, and the Indo-Pacific. And the documents we looked at even detail the redeployment of several B-2s, specifically from the 59th Bomb Wing to Diego Garcia for this very mission. That really highlights the strategic foresight involved.
So with the B-2s on their way, it's clear this isn't a solo act. I mean, beyond their own pretty immense capabilities, what kind of, ecosystem of protection and fuel keeps this whole thing airborne?
Right. Well, those KC-135s, the Stratotankers, absolutely packed with fuel. They don't just fly aimlessly. They loiter in friendly airspace, often over Saudi Arabia, as mentioned.
Just waiting. Performing
their, unglamorous but utterly vital task. And they certainly don't loiter unprotected. That's key.
Okay, so who protects the protectors?
That's where the F-18 electronic warfare squadrons come in. They provide that critical protection, escorting the tankers, but they do more. They're also instrumental in shielding the B-2 bombers themselves from detection and attack. They're effectively clearing a path through Iran's air defenses and guarding those essential flying gas stations.
And while all this is happening in the air, this kind of layered mission must also need significant naval support, right? What about carriers, submarines out in the Arabian Sea?
Absolutely. That's where you get the F-18 Super Hornets and, crucially, the EA-18 Growlers launching from carrier decks.
The Growlers, again, specialized role.
Very specialized and vital. They don't just emit electronic noise, they create a kind of cacophony. It's designed specifically to mask the strike group's movement.
Like electronic camouflage.
Pretty much. They flood Iranian frequencies with static, systematically disrupting communications, targeting systems, just creating widespread confusion across the enemy's network.
Right.
It's like fighting a war not just with bombs, but by deliberately blinding and deafening your enemy before a single weapon is even fired.
Okay, so the journey to the target is one massive challenge. But as the B-2s finally cross into Iranian airspace, things get even more perilous, I imagine.
Exponentially, yes.
How do these stealth bombers manage to navigate, let alone survive, in such a hostile environment?
Well, the B-2 strategy relies on extreme precision and, of course, stealth. They climb to incredibly high altitudes.
Higher up is safer.
Generally, yes, and they follow meticulously plotted routes. These are designed specifically to avoid known missile sites. Now, while the landscape below doesn't offer much natural cover...
Right, it's not like hiding behind mountains at that altitude.
Exactly. The bomber's radar-absorbing skin is their primary defense. It allows them to just sort of slip past enemy detection systems.
And that high-altitude approach, does that link to the weapons they're carrying?
Good point, yes. What's truly insightful about this high-altitude approach isn't just stealth, but how it directly leverages gravity for the massive GBU-57s. It transforms altitude into kinetic energy for that unparalleled penetration.
So one part of the plan feeds directly into another.
Precisely. It highlights how seemingly disparate elements of an operation are actually deeply interdependent.
You've mentioned Fordow and Natanz as particularly challenging targets. What exactly makes them so tough, and why are they such a priority?
Well, these aren't just surface targets. Fordow, for instance, is buried deep underground, protected by extensive fortifications.
Like mountain deep.
The sources suggest very deep, yes. And Natanz also presents a complex challenge. It has 6 above-ground buildings, but also 3 underground structures. And 2 of those underground structures are specifically noted as being large enough to hold, get this, 50,000 centrifuges.
50,000. Wow. Okay, so standard bombs aren't going to do much.
Exactly. Standard bombs simply won't cut it against that level of fortification.
Which brings us neatly to the weaponry. The sources you gave us describe 2 main types of attacks in this scenario. Cruise missiles and these GBU-57 bunker busters. Let's talk cruise missiles first.
Okay. Around 30 cruise missiles were reportedly fired. These came from U.S. nuclear submarines submerged in the region. Natanz was their primary target.
And how do those work, launching from underwater?
It's quite an engineering marvel, actually. High-pressure air ejects the missile from the tube. The tip breaks the water's surface. Then rocket boosters fire to propel it upwards. Once it's clear, the boosters fall away, the main engine engages, wings deploy, and off it goes towards the target.
And the goal at Natanz wasn't just superficial damage.
No, the impact was designed to go deeper, knocking out power on the lower levels where the centrifuges are housed, and also destroying the above-ground section of the pilot fuel enrichment plant, trying to cripple the operation.
Okay, now the GBU-57, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, often called the MOP, that's a really specialized piece of kit, isn't it?
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is its design and purpose. It's built specifically for deeply buried targets like Fordow.
How big are we talking?
It weighs approximately 30,000 pounds. That's around 14,000 kilograms. Immense.
Does it have engines or rockets?
No, it lacks thrusters. It relies on a precision guidance system, military-grade GPS, inertial navigation systems, and it has 4 active lattice fins. These allow it to glide accurately to its target.
And the penetration, that's the key part.
That's its unique selling point, you could say. It's constructed from a specially designed high-performance steel alloy, and it uses its immense weight falling under gravity to penetrate or, well, dig itself up to 200 feet into underground soil or concrete.
200 feet, that's incredible.
It is, and the fusing is clever too. 2 fuses, an SDD type of G-sensing, and a time delay placed at the rear to prevent damage on impact.
So it doesn't blow up right away?
Correct. They're engineered to ensure the bomb detonates after it has achieved maximum penetration deep underground, not on initial impact. This precision timing is what allows it to create that devastating effect, like a mini earthquake, capable of burying bunkers, even, reportedly, 20-story buildings built inside mountains.
And it's the B-2 Spirit that delivers this monster.
Yes, which makes sense given the MOP's sheer size and weight.
Yeah.
The aircraft can only carry 2 of these massive weapons in its bomb bays.
Just 2?
Just 2. And its specific role here, in this scenario, is to penetrate Fordow's deep underground site, punching down maybe 200 feet underground to destroy that nuclear enrichment facility.
That's an astonishing level of destructive power and precision aimed at one specific type of target.
But even with tech like that, there must still be risks, right? Complexities in hitting such fortified targets. Could something still go wrong?
Oh, absolutely. There are always risks, especially when you're facing active air defenses, even if they're degraded. The sources detail Iran's defenses, mentioning things like MiG-29s and aging F-14s.
F-14s? Still flying.
Apparently so, according to these documents. And while they're not cutting edge, they can still be dangerous if they manage a lucky intercept. Plus, you have Iranian ground controllers struggling through all that electronic jamming.
Right, the Growlers are still active.
Struggling to vector their fighters toward the incoming bombers.
So how do the U.S. forces counter that threat specifically, especially with all the electronic chaos the Growlers are creating?
Well, the EA-18 Growlers continue their electronic assault, just flooding Iranian frequencies with static, disrupting communications, messing with targeting systems, spreading that widespread confusion. It makes it incredibly difficult for enemy pilots to coordinate effectively. So even if they get airborne, they're half blind.
Pretty much. And if Iranian fighter jets do manage to get close, despite all that, the F-18 escorts are ready. They're guided by airborne warning and control systems, AWACS aircraft orbiting safely offshore.
Keeping an eye on everything.
Exactly. And engaging any threats with long-range missiles, forcing Iranian pilots to either break off the attack or frankly face certain destruction. This often overlooked aspect, the electromagnetic battle, is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
It really highlights how success in modern conflict is often won, or at least heavily influenced, in the invisible spectrum before a single shot is fired.
Okay, and what about the retreat? Let's say the GBU-57s hit their mark at Fordow. How did these B-2s get out of Iranian airspace safely? That seems just as dangerous.
It is. As the B-2s race westward, the sky behind them would likely be churning with chaos. You'd have SAM sites, surface-to-air missiles, maybe reactivating in desperation.
Firing blindly.
Potentially unleashing salvos that spiral harmlessly into empty air because they're being effectively outsmarted by electronic decoys deployed by the strike package.
Decoys too.
Meanwhile, the Growlers continue their electronic siege, suppressing defenses, while reserve F-18s might surge forward to reinforce the retreat path.
More layers.
Always more layers. Then, over friendly territory like Iraq, the bombers meet the tankers again, gulping down fuel. And F-22 Raptors might join the escort then, their advanced sensor scanning for any remaining or unexpected threats. It's a very, very meticulously choreographed exit strategy.
So let's zoom out. What does this all mean? Beyond the, incredible details of the hardware, the strategy, what was the primary objective outlined in this hypothetical deep dive? What's the core takeaway here for you, the listener?
Well, the U.S. primary goal, as described very clearly in the sources, is undeniably to cripple Iran's nuclear program, specifically by hitting its most critical enrichment sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. And this leads to a really crucial point raised in the material. Why were B-2 Spirit bombers apparently needed for this, especially when Israel had reportedly been bombarding Iran's nuclear sites already since maybe June 13th, 2025.
Right. The sources mentioned prior actions.
They did. And they suggest Israel, perhaps using its own bunker buster bombs, only managed to destroy things like ventilation shafts. They struggled apparently to penetrate Iran's most fortified underground nuclear sites like Fordow. The results were described as far less conclusive.
And that's where the B-2 and the GBU-57 become the difference maker.
Exactly. That's the key insight here, I think. This scenario vividly illustrates the military's ongoing high-stakes chess match. It's this constant race between evolving defensive fortifications, building things deeper and harder, and the development of breakthrough offensive capabilities like the GBU-57. Its capability for deeper penetration that claimed 200 feet underground allows for a potentially much more decisive outcome.
One hit potential.
Damaging or even destroying those underground uranium enrichment facilities, perhaps in one swift blow, possibly without significant interference from Iranian air defense because of the stealth approach. It fundamentally reshapes what might have once been considered impenetrable.
What an incredible deep dive. I mean, into a hypothetical, yes, but so meticulously detailed. From those huge B-2s taking off all the way from Missouri to the sheer precision of a 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb, it really highlights the immense complexity and, frankly, the strategic thinking behind such a scenario.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it just underscores this continuous evolution of both offensive and defensive military technologies, especially when facing these increasingly hardened, buried targets. The level of detail in the sources you provided really did paint a vivid picture of what a truly comprehensive operation of this nature would entail.
Our mission, as always, was to give you a shortcut to being well-informed on this really fascinating hypothetical situation.
Which leads us to something for you to consider. How might these described advancements in deep penetration weaponry actually alter global defense strategies? Or even, the future building underground fortifications? What stands out most significantly to you from this incredibly detailed scenario we've unpacked today?